Thousands of years ago, far away from kingdoms and royal palaces, stood a peaceful ashram on the banks of Tamasa river. Deep forest stretched as far as the eye could see. Ancient trees rose high into the sky. The songs of the countless birds filled the air. And through that quiet wilderness followed the gentle waters of the Tamasa. The ashram itself was not grand, yet anyone who entered it felt a sense of peace. At sunrise, the air echoed with sacred Vedic chants. Students gathered around their teacher and devoted themselves to learning. Great sages came and went. And the ashram belongs to a person whose name would one day be remembered for all the time. Maharshi Valmiki. People often said Valmiki never rushed his words, and he never made a careless decision. Such was his wisdom. Such was his reputation. Yet one day, a question entered his mind, a question that refused to leave. Was there a man in this world who possessed every noble virtue? A man who was brave, yet free from pride, a man who always spoke the truth, yet remained kind and compassionate, a man who would keep his word even at the cost of his own life, a man who felt the pain of others as his own, a man who lived for his people before himself. Had such a person truly ever been born? The question stayed with him. Whether he walked to the ashram, or sat beside the Tamasa river, or spoke with his disciples, his thoughts always returned to the same question. Then one day, a visitor arrived, a sage whose name was known across the three worlds. A veena rested in his hands, a gentle smile shone upon his face. He had travelled through the heaven, earth, and beyond. He had spoken with gods, he had met great kings, and he had witnessed countless events unfold across the ages. It was none other than Devarshi Narada. Narada arrived at the ashram. Valmiki welcomed him with great respect. He offered him a seat and inquired about his well-being. For some time, the two sages spoke together. But the question in Valmiki's heart remained unanswered. At last, he asked, "O Devarshi, you have travelled through the three worlds. You have met great sages and mighty kings. Tell me, is there truly a man on this earth who possesses every noble virtue? A man who never abandoned truth? A man who lives by dharma? A man who stands as an example for all humanity? Does such a person really exist?" Narada smiled. For a few moments, he remained silent. He looked at Valmiki and spoke. "Yes, Maharshi." That single answer caught Valmiki's attention. Narada continued, "Yes, such a great soul was born on this very earth, a prince of the Ikshvaka dynasty, the living embodiment of dharma, the very image of truth, and his name is the Sri Rama." The moment Valmiki heard it, something stirred within him. Who was Rama? Where was he born? What made him so extraordinary? Question after question filled his mind. He wanted to know everything about Rama's life, his struggles, his journey. After some time, Narada rose to leave. He picked up his veena, looked at Valmiki with a smile, and then slowly disappeared into the heavens. Narada was gone. But one name continued to echo in Valmiki's heart: Rama. The next morning, Valmiki set out with his disciple Bharadwaja and walked towards the banks of the Tamasa river. The river looked even more beautiful that day. The cool breeze drifted through the trees. The water flowed gently. Birds sang from every direction, and among them was a pair of Krauncha birds. The two birds moved together in perfect happiness, as though the rest of the world did not exist. Seeing them, Valmiki smiled. But the moment did not last. A hunter appeared. Without warning, he drew his bow. The arrow cut through the air and struck the male bird. The bird fell instantly. Beside it, the female bird cried out in grief. Her sorrowful cry shattered the silence of the forest. Valmiki's heart grew heavy. He had witnessed suffering before. He had seen death before. Yet something about that bird's grief touched him deeply. And in that moment of sorrow, Words flowed from him without thought. A verse, a shloka, the first of its kind. The meaning of the shloka was, you could never reach Brahmaloka for the sins you committed. When these words left his lips, even Valmiki was astonished. What was it that I just spoke? Still wondering, he returned to the ashram. But the day was far from over. Suddenly, the sky filled with a divine radiance. A brilliant light spread across the heavens, and from within that light appeared the Creator Himself, the Lord Brahma. Four-faced, majestic, divine, Valmiki immediately rose and bowed before him. Brahma smiled. Valmiki, the story of Rama that Narada spoke of, you shall tell it to the world. The past, the present, and the future, all shall be revealed to you. There will be no secret in Rama's life hidden from your sight, and your words shall live for as long as this world endure. With Brahma's blessings, a new light awakened within Valmiki's heart. On that day, a sage became a poet, and a story began its journey towards immortality. A story that would inspire generations, a story that would travel across centuries, a story the world would come to know as Srimad Ramayana. In ancient northern India, on the banks of Sarayu River, stood a great city. Its name was Ayodhya. In those days, people often said, no one can ever conquer Ayodhya. That is how the city got its name. But Ayodhya was more than just a strong kingdom. It was a city of wide streets, magnificent palaces, beautiful gardens. Merchants arrived from every corner of the land. Horses, elephants, rare treasures, everything could be found in Ayodhya. At sunrise, the waters of the Sarayu shone like gold. Along the river banks, sages offered their prayers. Children played in the streets. Merchants opened their shops and began their day. Ayodhya had everything: wealth, prosperity, happiness. And so, if someone in those days had asked, what is the greatest city on the earth? Most people would have given the same answer: Ayodhya. And ruling this great kingdom was the great Dasaratha. The very mention of his name struck fear into his enemies, because in battle, a few could stand against him. In his younger days, when Dasharatha's chariot charged across the battlefield, enemy armies would scatter. When he drew his bow, his arrows flew like lightning. Even distant kings thought twice before making an enemy of him. But his people admired him for more than his strength. They did not see him only as a warrior. They saw him as their king, their protector, a man who cared for them. Dasharatha listened to the problems of the people. He punished those who did wrong. He rewarded those who did good. Every decision he made was guided by one thought: what is best for my kingdom? What is best for my people? This is why people of Ayodhya loved him. If anyone asked, what kind of a king is Dasharatha? Their faces would fill with pride, and they would say, we are fortunate to have a king like him. In his royal palace lived his three queens, Kaushalya, Kaikeyi, and Sumitra. But even with all this, Dasharatha was not happy. Something was missing from his life. He had no children. After the palace grew quiet, Dasharatha would often walk alone to the upper terrace. From there, he could see Sarayu flowing peacefully through the night. He could stand there for a long time, lost in thought. Only one question filled his mind: after me, who will rule this kingdom? Would the great Ikshvaku dynasty end with him? Would the throne remain without a heir? That thought would not let him sleep. Dasharatha had won many battles. He had defeated powerful enemies. But in this one matter, he felt helpless. Finally, one day he made a decision. He could wait no longer. He sent for his guru, Maharshi Vasishtha. As soon as the sage entered the royal court, Dasharatha stood up and bowed respectfully. Vasishtha looked at the king. He asked nothing. For a few moments, he remained silent. Then he said gently, Maharaja, I know what is troubling your heart. Those words opened a floodgate. Dasharatha finally spoke of the pain he had carried for years. Gurudeva, I have a kingdom, I have wealth, I have the love of my people, but I do not have a child. After me, who will take care of this kingdom? That thought follows me every day and night. Vasishtha listened quietly. Then he smiled. Maharaja, do not lose hope. Time has not abandoned you. You will be blessed with children. For a moment, Dasharatha could hardly believe what he had heard. He looked at the sage in amazement. After many years, hope returned to his eyes. But Vasishtha was not finished. For that blessing to come true, a great yajna must be performed. The Putrakameshti Yagna, a sacred ritual performed for the blessing of the children. And to conduct this yajna, a great sage must come to Ayodhya. Dasharatha listened carefully. Who is the sage, Gurudeva? Vasishtha replied, his name is Rishashranga. And with the arrival of that sage, the history of Ayodhya was about to change forever. The moment he heard the name Rishashranga, hope appeared on Dasharatha's face. But along with hope came a question. Gurudeva, who is Rishashranga? Vasishtha smiled. Maharaja, he is no ordinary sage. The power of his penance is extraordinary. People say that wherever he sets foot, even dry land becomes green again. Dasharatha listened carefully. Vasishtha continued. Deep within the forest, far away from the world, lived a great sage named Vibhandaka. And Rishashranga was his son. From childhood, the forest was his entire world. He knew nothing of cities, nothing of kings, nothing of the noise and distractions of ordinary life. His father, his ashram, his penance, and that was his world. Yet stories of his spiritual power had spread across the land. People believed that wherever Rishashranga lived, the rains would come, the crops would flourish, and the people would prosper. Now, such a sage had to be invited to Ayodhya. Dasharatha wasted no time. With a great respect, he sent an invitation to Rishashranga. A few days later, Ayodhya began preparing for his arrival. The streets were cleaned. The beautiful decorations appeared outside every home. Flower garlands hung across the city. Even inside the royal palace, there was a feeling of excitement. Because that day, Maharshi Rishashranga was about to enter Ayodhya. Dasharatha himself came to the city gates to welcome him. Ministers gathered, sages arrived. Thousands of citizens filled the streets. Everyone looked in the same direction, waiting, watching. Then in the distance, a lone sage appeared, dressed in simple white robes, long matted hair, a calm and peaceful face. There was no hurry in his walk, no pride in his eyes, yet everyone who saw him felt an urge to fold their hands in respect. He was Maharshi Rishashranga. Dasharatha stepped forward. There was no pride of a king in him. He bowed before the sage with the humility of a disciple. Maharshi, your arrival has blessed Ayodhya. Rishashranga smiled, and from that day, a new chapter began in the kingdom. Preparations for the Putrakameshti Yagna began immediately. On the banks of the Sarayu river, a grand Yagna hall was built. Sages arrived from distant lands. Vedic scholars gathered from every direction. From dawn till dusk, sacred chants filled the air. The fragrance of the sandalwood spread everywhere. And at the center of it all, the sacred fire burned steadily. Dasharatha, along with his 3 queens, took part in the yajna with deep devotion. Days passed. At last, the yajna reached its final stage. The entire city of Ayodhya waited in anticipation. Inside the yajna hall, Rishashranga sat with his eyes closed, chanting sacred mantras. Around him sat great sages at the center of the burnt sacred fire, and nearby there is Dasharatha, his hands folded, his heart racing, years of waiting, years of hope. And perhaps, in just a few moments, his life would change forever. Then suddenly, something extraordinary happened. The sacred fire began to glow brighter. The flames rose higher and higher. A divine light filled the entire yajna hall. Everyone watched in amazement. Even Dasharatha held his breath. Slowly, from within the flames, a divine being emerged. His body shone like the sun. He wore golden garments. His presence was majestic. And in his hands, he carried a golden bowl. Inside the bowl was a divine payasam, a sacred offering from the gods. Everyone present folded their hands in reverence. The divine being walked straight towards Dasharatha. Then he spoke, Maharaja, the gods are pleased with your yajna. Take this sacred payasam and give it to your queens. You will be blessed with great sons. With those words, he placed the golden bowl into Dasharatha's hands. For a moment, Dasharatha couldn't speak. The sorrow he had carried for so many years seemed to melt away. His eyes filled with the tears. Holding the golden bowl close to his heart, he stood in silence. Because this was not just Paisam, this was hope, this was the future of Ayodhya, the future of Ikshvaka dynasty. But no one in that hall knew that from this divine blessing would be born a child who would one day become one of the most revered figures in human history. His three queens were also filled with joy as well. His first queen was Kausalya, the senior queen, graceful, kind-hearted. Whenever someone in the palace was troubled, Kausalya was the first person they turned to. The second was Queen Kaikeyi. The stories of her courage were known throughout Ayodhya. Long ago, she had even saved Dasharatha's life on the battlefield. Intelligent, fearless, confident. Those qualities made her stand apart. The third was Queen Sumitra. She was a woman of few words, but her presence brought peace to everyone around her. She found happiness in the happiness of others. Dasharatha then distributed the divine payasam. Half of it he gave to Kausalya. From the remaining half, he gave a portion to Kaikeyi. The rest he gave to Sumitra. Then he paused for a moment. As if guided by an unseen hand, he took the little that remained and gave it once again to Sumitra. At that moment, he seemed like a small decision, a simple act. But Dasharatha had no idea that this choice would one day play an important role in the story of Ramayana. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Across Ayodhya, a feeling of joyful anticipation filled the air. Inside the palace, everyone waited eagerly. The people of the kingdom spoke of only one thing. The kingdom will soon have a prince. The Ikshvaka dynasty will finally have an heir. And then, the day finally arrived. That morning, Ayodhya felt different. The Sarayu flowed peacefully. Dasharatha stood outside the queen's chambers. Then, at last, the news arrived. A son had been born to Queen Kausalya. The moment he heard it, Dasharatha rushed inside. For the first time, he looked upon the child. And for a few moments, he simply stood there, looking. In the tiny face, there was a strange calmness. In those closed eyes, there was an unusual radiance. Then the child was named Sri Rama. A few days later, Queen Kaikeyi gave birth to a son. He was named Bharata. And the Queen Sumitra was blessed with not one child, but two. The first was Lakshmana, the second Shatrughna. Ayodhya erupted in celebration. The streets were decorated. Temples' bells rang across the city. People shared sweets and rejoiced. After so many years, the Ikshvaka dynasty finally had four heirs, four young princes. But among them was one child who would one day change the course of the history. But for now, he was only a child. The wheel of time never stands still. As it turned, the young princes of Ayodhya slowly grew into fine young boys. Even as a child, Rama was different. He never spoke harshly. He never hurt anyone. He was not stubborn. He never thought only about himself. Even as a young boy, he learned to care about others before himself. That is why everyone loved him. From the servants in the palace to the ordinary people in the streets of Ayodhya, everyone treated Rama like their own child. Whenever Dasharatha returned from the royal court, there was one question he always asked: where is Rama? He would look for him throughout the palace. Sometimes Rama would be asleep in Kausalya's lap. Sometimes he would be playing among the flowers of the royal gardens. And the moment he saw his father, he would run towards him with a smile. In those moments, Dasharatha was not a king, he was simply a father. But among the four brothers, there was one who could never stay away from Rama. That was Lakshmana. Whenever Rama went, Lakshmana followed. If Rama sat down to eat, Lakshmana sat beside him. If Rama walked into gardens, Lakshmana ran after him. Even at night, if Rama was not nearby, Lakshmana could not sleep peacefully. The people of the palace loved watching the two brothers together. Their bond was unlike anything they had ever seen. Bharata, too, had a gentle nature. Much like Rama, he treated everyone with kindness and respect. And just as Lakshmana was devoted to Rama, Shatrughna was always by Bharata's side. Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrughna. The four brothers shared a special bond. Whenever they were together, the palace came alive with laughter and joy. As the years passed, their education began. They studied the Vedas, they learned the duties of a king, they mastered horse riding, and they trained in the art of warfare. Among them all, Rama excelled in every field, yet he never showed the pride. And that made Dasharatha even happier. One day, princes were practicing archery. A small target had been placed far away. Dasharatha was there. Maharshi Vasishtha was there. Ministers and commanders stood watching. Rama stepped forward. He lifted his bow. Slowly, he placed an arrow on the string. Silence filled the air. For a few moments, he focused on the target. Then, he released the arrow. The arrow shot forward with incredible speed and struck the target perfectly. Everyone watching smiled with admiration. Dasharatha's face filled with pride. He turned towards Maharshi Vasishtha. The sage smiled and said, Maharaja, Rama is no ordinary prince. Dasharatha looked back at his son. Rama stood quietly with his bow in his hand, calm, focused, peaceful. There was something extraordinary about him. But at that moment, no one knew what the future held. No one knew that far away, a great sage had already begun his journey towards Ayodhya. Deep within the forest, a lone figure walked through the wilderness. Long matted hair, a commanding presence, eyes filled with brilliance. There was confidence in his stride, power in his presence. As he walked, it felt through even the forest had fallen silent. Years of penance, years of struggle, years of victories. His life itself was an extraordinary story. Ayodhya did not yet know who he was, but his arrival would change Rama's life forever. The name of that sage was Brahmarshi Viswamitra.